Hi y'all, I am Brie G. I'm an alcoholic. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Paige, thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for everybody being here. This is a great group, great crowd. I can tell you that this group in particular, it played a really big part, has played a really big part in my sobriety. I mean, you guys have helped me walk through a lot of fear and a lot of questions that I didn't know about Alcoholics Anonymous, and really just led by that example. So thank you all. You are all so welcoming and so kind, and every time we come here, you guys just make us feel at home. And originally I thought that my home group was the best one in the world, and I think we're kind of tied for first. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I'll get some of the pleasantries out of the way. I have a sobriety date. It's September the 18th of 2014. I have a home group. There's a solution group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Half our group's here. Thank you guys. We meet on Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. It's a good meeting. You can come check us out on Thursday. It wouldn't conflict here. We'd love to have you. I was telling Melissa and Shelley in the car that I had just given a talk a couple days ago, and Bill and Justin came out, and I was like, man, I feel bad. They have to hear this again, so I'll try to work something else in there. Thank you for everybody who came out tonight. It's really, really an honor and a privilege to be here. So I guess I'll dive into the reason why I'm here tonight, and it's to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I grew up, I was born in Massachusetts. I lived there for 4 or 5 years, and we bounced back and forth from Massachusetts to North Carolina. I grew up in a really good home. I had a mom and a dad, older brother, older sister, and we were raised with morals and values, and we did church on Sunday, and we would pray before meals and pray before bed, and I remember having an idea of what faith and God looked like as a little girl. And you know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was a little bit harder for me to hear the word God. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, hopefully. I think that's really the purpose why I'm here, is to tell you I came to know God. So, good family, active in sports. I'm not particularly brilliant. I'm just kind of an average girl. The only thing I excelled at was sports. That was it. Really liked doing that. And I could tell you some of my earliest memories. I just remember fear. I was always so afraid. I was so afraid of everyone, everything. I never felt like I was smart enough, pretty enough, cool enough. I never matched up to you. And it's not because I didn't come from a good home, and it's not because I didn't get the love of a really amazing, loving family. I just remember just being consumed with self-centered fear from some of my earliest memories, and that's really sad. So I didn't really have a whole lot of drinking at home. I lived in a very structured home. Dad went to work, and Mom had probably the harder job, and that was to take care of the 3 kids, and he probably escaped pretty good by getting to go do that and not have to deal with us, because we were some tough kids. And so there wasn't really drinking at home. I think I saw my dad drink maybe twice ever in life. And my mom, she'd have a glass of wine with dinner, and she wouldn't even finish it. And it didn't make much sense, right? And so again, nothing too remarkable at home, good home life, and I can tell you, I remember it like it was yesterday, the first time I ever got drunk. I had a few sips of liquor and beer and wine that we would steal from our parents throughout the years, but nothing to really get an effect. It was just kind of the gross taste, and we'd put it away. And I remember, I remember almost every detail. My brother, he's just a little bit older than I am, year and some change, and we've always been really close. We hung out with a lot of the same kids and got in a lot of trouble together. And one of his friends' parents were going out of town, and a bunch of people were going over there, and it was supposed to be a really good time, and I was excited because there's me. I'm in middle school, and they're in high school, and this was exciting, but I'm terrified, also extremely terrified. And I remember we got to this house, and all the lights were off, and opened the door, and nobody was downstairs. It was just me and my brother, and you could hear joy and laughter and music and people enjoying life upstairs. And that just makes me even more terrified. You know, I'm even more afraid than even walking into this door. So I can hear it, and I can see the bedroom light on at the top of the stairs, and we're walking up, and I'm physically shaking. I'm so afraid. I can hardly contain myself. My brother's walking in front of me, and we walk in, and it's everybody's having the best time. They've got the bedroom window open, some people are sitting on the roof, the music's going, and they're all just enjoying themselves, and nobody's making a fool out of themselves. They're just having a good time, and I'm terrified. So I sit in a little circle, and they're passing around this cup of vanilla vodka, and it took me a couple years into sobriety to smell vanilla again and be okay with it. And everybody was taking a couple sips and passing it around, and it came over to me, and I drank the entire glass. They just filled it up, and I was little. I was pretty little. I was 12, so there wasn't much meat to me. And I remember the feeling was just electric. I remember just instantaneously the fear, the worry, the doubt, everything went away, and I felt like I could be a part of. And I didn't even know that I was looking for that in life, and it was there. And I remember it was glorious for like a half hour, and then I blacked out, and I'm told that I really misbehaved and puked everywhere, and my sister had to come rescue me and my brother, and lie to my dad about it, and she got, you know, a good talking to about it, and I got grounded for the weekend. And I mean, that really characterizes the rest of my drinking career. I drink to a blackout every single time. That's my purpose, because I can't moderate the amount of alcohol that I'm going to drink. And you know what I'll tell you is, from 12 to 16, there wasn't much of an opportunity for me to drink. When I could, I absolutely did, and it, in the beginning, it did something for me. It really just, I loved the way alcohol made me feel. It made me feel more a part of. It took away those fears, and it quickly turned on me. My father passed away when I was 16, and then cue the pity and the victim and all those cards. I was still in high school, and I was drinking, and we would leave for lunch, and we would drink out lunch and do a bunch of other high school stuff on lunch and come back. And I don't know how I passed, but I managed to pass high school. But I can tell you from that moment that we lost my father, because we really loved and respected him, and he was just a good dude. I walked away from God. I walked away from faith and believing that there was something much greater out there. And I just, my drinking reached pretty epic proportions and really turned on me pretty quickly. So by 17, I was arrested out of my bed as a direct result of my drinking. And it was funny, because when you're 17 and you're brought to a detox, they put you in with the mental health and the substance abuse. And you know, there's part in our literature where it talks about how if there's like sufficient reasons to stop drinking, that could have been it for me, but it wasn't. I mean, I remember there was this girl in there. She must have been 5 years old, and you're all together. And she started losing her mind, and they hit her with a needle, and there's two big dudes dragging her down the hallway. And you would think that like that was scary enough to stop. And I turned 18 while I was in there, and I didn't think there was a problem. I didn't think I had a drinking problem. I thought that that's what kids did. I mean, that's what all the kids I hung out with did. And as soon as I left there, I started drinking again. And it just, it stopped becoming a luxury for me. You know, in the beginning I would drink when I could, and now I had to drink, and I really needed it. So I would plan my days around that, and I got a job, and I thought, because I saw a lot of people that I went to high school with that were living good lives and getting educations and just doing things with their lives, and then there's me, you know, that's just constantly wanting to party and staying out all night and getting in fist fights and breaking relationships, and I can't show up for commitments, and I can't get to work on time, and all the while I'm just becoming more and more miserable, and alcohol is not working for me anymore, and I'm having to mix other things in, and it's just not getting me where I want to go. And I got separated, married, and divorced all within 2 years as a direct result of my drinking. I couldn't hold anything together. I couldn't be honest about anything in life, where I was going, what I was doing. I was taking some pretty terrible actions that I said I'd never do, and doing things that I said I never would. And After that marriage ended, because of me, I was on a red-eye flight to Massachusetts to go to treatment again. And nobody knew what to do with me. My family, God bless them, they would take me in their homes, they would drive me out on their couch, and I had been to my first fellowship meeting when I was 17, but I was drunk when I went. I was under the influence, so I didn't hear a message. There was nothing hopeful in my heart. I wasn't ready to try to accept some spiritual help. So I went to that treatment, and I remember while I was up there, I was talking to my uncle, and he had been had a really hard time with drugs, and he was able somehow to stop on his own, though he lived a pretty miserable life. Really mean dude. We were talking about Alcoholics Anonymous while I was up there, and I remember driving in the car, and he was explaining the effect that alcohol had on him, and he was still drinking. He was still somehow drinking, and we would talk about the other stuff, and he said, yeah, I tried AA before, but it wasn't for me, and I got the sponsor, and I said, yeah, it's not for me either, and I had no experience here. And then there's me, who's at my second treatment, and I can't stop drinking. I'm destroying everything. So I dried out there for 30 days, didn't go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I remember getting on the plane, and I figured if I can just lay off all the other stuff, lay off the hard stuff, and drink like a lady, everything's gonna be good. And before the wheels of the plane even left the ground, I was drinking, and I got back to North Carolina, and I thought what was important was the material world. If I can get the job and get the car and the apartment and be self-supporting, which I never was, everything will be good, and I'll be able to drink normally, and it got really bad. So the last year, I went from living with a friend to living on the last remaining couch that would have me. I was violent. I would pick fights with people, and it was every single time I drank. It wasn't most times. Like I remember hearing from the podium, people would say, when I drink, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Well, I do. I know exactly how I'm gonna behave, and it's not good. And I'm probably gonna go with a group of people that I don't know, and wake up somewhere that I'm not familiar with, and get in a fight with somebody and worry about what charges are coming and the damage that I had caused, and have to do the search and rescue the next day to go rescue friends or try to rescue a friendship. And so I had a lot of legal charges that I was up against, and I just wanted to die. There was absolutely, I felt like no reason for me to be here. I was miserable. I couldn't stop drinking. I had to drink, and I figured, you know what, I'll just drink myself to death and try to kill myself. And I remember I would Google painless ways to kill yourself, and I didn't want to die like painfully. And I remember I stole a gun from my brother-in-law, and it was like a martyr. I had one bullet in the gun and carried it around for a week, and I couldn't do it. And I remember I was at my buddy's house. This is right before I was truly homeless, and he was a good guy. His dad had an old Jeep, an old Jeep Wrangler, and I remember I asked him, I had this idea. And I said, all right, you're gonna ask him this. So I asked him, can I borrow your dad's Jeep? And he's like, yeah, I'll ask him. I said, hey, while you're out, can you also grab a garden hose and some duct tape? And he was like, no, we're not gonna do that. And so I left that house shortly after that, and I was living in the streets, and I would open car doors hoping at nighttime that I could just sit in somebody's back seat out of the elements, and mostly the bugs, not a huge fan of bugs, and life was bad. I would sleep in parks, and I just couldn't stop drinking. It was to the point where not only I was physically needing alcohol, when I would drink it, I would throw up before I could even keep some down, and it was just wash, rinse, repeat, and it was a very lonely and sad place. And so I met this guy right there towards the end, and he was upgrade homeless. He lived in the mechanic shop that he worked in. And I figured, this is great. He drinks like I do, and he does the things that I do, and I'll just hang out here for a while. And my bed was a third row that had gotten taken out of a Suburban, and we were living in this mechanic shop, and we would walk up and down South Saunders Street, and I was barefoot. And I remember telling this lady, I think we were a group of folks like us, and this woman who was not alcoholic was standing there, and I was telling this story that I would walk barefoot up and down the street, picking up cigarette butts, trying to find, cigarettes to smoke, and we stopped in this thrift store on the street, and I got these like plastic sandals, and we were just basically walking back and forth to the gas station to get alcohol. And I remember that it was summertime, it was super hot, and these plastic sandals like cut into my feet, so my feet were bleeding, and I'm laughing while I'm telling the story, and this lady, her jaw just dropped, and she's standing there, and she couldn't understand like behind it, and so we were doing that, and I just lived in a lot of paranoia, a lot of fear, and I had this really crappy little burner phone, and I was so paranoid, like nobody could track this phone. It was the crappiest little burner phone, and I would send out these like sympathy, pity texts to my family, and then take the battery out, take the SIM card out. Like no one's tracking this phone. It's almost a rotary dial phone. It was so old. And so I remember that fateful night, and I will share, this is really important because I remember throughout my drinking thinking, I'm gonna change now once a consequence hit. The drinking tickets, the fist fights, the police, the arrest, all the things, like I'm gonna change tomorrow. And I meant it in my heart, like this is gonna be the last time that I drink, and every single day I couldn't stop. So I was sitting in this mechanic shop, and I hadn't seen my family in some time, and they never stopped looking for me. They would go to old associates' houses and scare them and try to find me, and they finally did. And I remember I was sitting on my bed in the mechanic shop, and I heard a knock on that metal door, and I told my buddy to turn the music down, and he did, and it was my brother's voice, and I was like, oh no, I'll just run. That's usually what I do. So I ran up the stairs, and I looked out this little glass window at the top of the stairs, and I saw a bunch of little heads out there, and it was nighttime, so I couldn't tell, but I thought it was the cops, and I knew I was in a pretty fair bit of trouble. And so I did the walk of shame, and I went downstairs and told him to open the door, and my brother was just so happy to see me, and he just had this big smile on his face, and he hugged me, and he told me that I stunk, and he was really happy to see me, and he brought me a bottle of water and a Cliff Bar, and he said, I was expecting you to be blue and lifeless on a couch, and I'm glad you're not. And so that was nice. It felt good to see my brother, and then my sister came right behind, and she was not happy to see me. She was very upset, and she said a lot of bad words, and she had handcuffs with her, and they citizens arrested me. Their sister, they handcuffed me to the dashboard of her Jeep, and it was so trippy because I was under the influence, and I'm handcuffed in this car, and then they take me to the park that I was sleeping in for a while, and I left my book bag at, and I'm walking around this park and carry with the handcuffs in front of me, and I've got my brother and my sister, and I'm a flight risk, so anyway, so I ended up at the police station, and I turned myself in, and I can tell you that's the first time that had nothing to do with the consequence, but that was the first time in years that I felt peace with handcuffs behind my back. I was sitting in a holding cell just waiting to be processed into jail, and I felt this overwhelming feeling of peace. And then the severity of my situation entered into my heart, and then there was the terror, and I was there a short time, and while I was there, these ladies were talking about this treatment facility, and they made it sound glorious. They were like, yeah, it's free, you can go, and I had nowhere to go. Nobody would have me. It was either go back to the streets, continue drinking, or try. And they made it sound really good, and I was starting to feel a little bit better, and it's crazy because like I had gotten arrested, and then there were like 5 more warrants served while I was there, and it's crazy just over those 5 picture days when you're not drinking, how you start bathing and start looking a little bit better. And I started listening to these girls, and they were talking about how great this place was, and they said that you had to be a member of a fellowship, and it was highly recommended to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it sounded good because I had no other options, but these people bragging about this place were sitting in jail with me, so I was like, I don't know, but I did go, and there was a lot of fear. I was dried out for a little bit, and I went to this place, and I remember walking up to the steps, and I remember hearing that joy again. I remember hearing the laughter and seeing people that seemed like they were happy in life. And they were sharing these stories, and I was like, man, they've been through the ringer too, you know. And a few of the ladies, they kind of took me under their wing, and they didn't have much more time than I did, and that was powerful for me. These people were maybe just a few weeks sober, and they were doing exactly what the program teaches us to do, trying to help somebody. And so we went to a bunch of speaker meetings while we were there, and I could identify with your problem. You got a lot of problems, me too. And then the moment you started talking about God, that was where I parted ways. And there's a part in our book that like really hit my heart the first time that my sponsor read it to me, and it talks just about that, how we can identify with a problem, but the moment you talk about spiritual matters, that's it. And that's how it was for me. And so I did drink again. It was for about 2 weeks, and I lied about it for 9 months. I don't recommend doing that. If you want to stay sick, lie about your sobriety date. So what I did do after those 2 weeks, I was in a lot of pain, and I didn't want to be in that pain anymore. And I remember this woman, she would come up, and she was working with a bunch of girls there, and she seemed happy and bubbly, and I heard her story, and I was like, man, she had a pretty rough go of it. If she can stay sober, you know, let's do this, let's try it. And so I did, and she started taking me through the steps, and she kept it really simple. There was nothing complex or complicated, though I'd liked to make things complicated. And she really just came and met with me once a week, and she read the book to me, and she didn't do it her way. She just literally read the book to me, and she answered my questions, and she made very simple suggestions. And what I can tell you is once I started taking those suggestions, and they were always the same too, and it used to bother me so much. She would say, go to God and help someone. Those two things. It was that simple. There was nothing more that she would tell me to do. And I didn't believe in God. I didn't want to believe in God. I was mad at God for God killed this person, God, all of this stuff, and really had nothing to do with God. And so we took the steps, and I started taking those suggestions. She said, you know, if you're having a hard time believing in God, or having a hard time formulating whatever you think is your own conception of God, why don't you just try? Why don't you just try to pray however you want? There's no right or wrong way to do it. And so I did, and it was crazy because there was bigger stances in between the time when I was thinking about drinking. And that was miraculous for me, because I couldn't even fathom. I remember my first few speaker meetings, I'd sit in there, and these men and women would say they'd had a year or 10 years or 20 or 30, and it just seemed impossible. I never thought that Alcoholics Anonymous could work for me. I didn't think that a spiritual solution was the answer to all of my problems, and I came to find out that it is. So what I did is I continued working with a sponsor, and continued taking the suggestions, and I got busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't sit still, and I walked through a lot of fear, because I was terrified of people when I came here. I was so afraid to talk to you. I was so afraid I didn't know how to communicate, and it was just really difficult for me to connect, because I was just so full of self-centered fear and didn't have God yet. And what I did do is I had people like the people in this room, and some of them are in here tonight, that noticed that. It was plain to see that I was really afraid, and they took notice of me, and they would stand with me at the door while I greeted people, and they would help me walk through that fear, and they would take the time to just be patient with me, and they'd come and pick me up from my sober living home, and take me to meetings and to fellowships and conferences and conventions. And I got around to a lot of parts of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was really amazing. I got involved in service pretty early on. I got a home group pretty early on, and the first home group that I became a part of, it was actually at the treatment facility. And what was amazing at that time, and I hope it's still to this day, is we were involved in treatment facilities. And here we are, homeless in a treatment facility, and I was one of 90-something women that had a license. There was like 4 of us, so it was like the golden ticket there, you know. And what they would let us do is we would go to the treatment facility meetings, pick a day that we were going to take a meeting into to a hospital or institution, and we would do that. And I remember the very first time I went, and this is where I really started to see God working in my life. Not that he wasn't before, it's where I really started to recognize that there's really a power in Alcoholics Anonymous. Here's me, don't know my tail from my elbow, and I don't know much about Alcoholics Anonymous, but I had been sober for 90 days, had a sponsor, had a home group, and I got me and 4 other homeless chicks in a van, and we went to a treatment facility in Raleigh, and we went there, and this kid that I went, this guy I went to high school with, he was there. He was standing in the lobby, and we didn't know what we were doing, and he was coming out of a meeting, and he was sober, and he had had some time in the program, a few years, and he could tell we were all terrified. We didn't know what to do, and he said, hey, look, would it be okay if I tagged along with you? And I was like, please do. Yeah, please, come on in. And he did, and those simple suggestions that my sponsor made from almost day one, go out and help someone, those 2 things together have proved to be so important for me in my sobriety. And my prayers have changed and evolved. In the beginning it was, please God, help me to stop drinking. Please God, take the obsession. And now it's, emotional things like, please God, help me not to be fearful so I can better serve people. Things that I could do to try to help people better. So we went there, and we're sitting in there, and it just, I felt lighter. It felt amazing to be able to sit with these men and women and share what little experience that we had, but it seemed like light years to the people that were there, and getting to talk to them after, and I wasn't thinking about me, I wasn't thinking about drinking, and it was really working in my life. And that was a moment for me where I really just, I started to be on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I left that treatment facility, I went to a sober living home, and I stayed there for a few months, and I continued doing the same exact things that were suggested. I didn't in the beginning because I was super excited the first couple weeks, and I felt it spiritually. I'd stopped thinking about drinking, and life was getting better. And I wasn't going to as many meetings, and not that that's the important part. The important part was I wasn't staying active and current with my sponsor for a couple weeks after I moved in there, and I felt it, and it didn't feel good. And I called her and told her how I was feeling and what I was thinking, and that was the only time that I had ever not tried to stay anchored in here and try to help people. So as soon as my sponsor gave the green light, like I don't know about y'all, I don't know if you've ever heard of Summer, like Summer Sicker Than Others. I was a Summer, so I think she waited a little bit of time to give me the green light to work with some folks. And once she did, I started working with other people immediately, and cue the fear. And I was really afraid about how to help people. What do I say to them? What do I do? What do I do here? How do it wasn't up to me to try to fix them. It was very simple, and when I would call my sponsor with all these questions, when it came to working with other people, she would keep it really simple. She said, hey, the same exact thing I did for you. Just meet with them, read the book, try to help guide them spiritually, that's it. And it kept it really simple, and so I got myself anchored in another home group, and I've been very fortunate. I've been a part of some really strong home groups, and those groups have helped me to grow a lot, along with good sponsorship. And we were talking about it in the car on the way up. This was a very small and intimate group, and in the beginning there was maybe 20, 25 people that it would attend, and then it dwindled down to 6 or 7, and it was small. And it was funny, we'd be sitting in business meetings every month, and we'd be like, all right, Jeremy, run through GSR, also run through treatment facilities, also run through it. And we all knew what we were all doing in the group, but it was cool to get to serve together. And we left that group and went to my current home group that I've been at for a little bit now. And this is where I got to see a lot of traditions being practiced, a lot of principles being practiced live right there in my face. And I did good here with you guys. I did really good in Alcoholics Anonymous. I could, try to help people and did good with that. Work, I was okay, but home is where I was not good. And I remember sitting at a meeting and hearing this guy share from the podium. He was like, you can judge a man by what they would say about him in his home. And that just struck fear through my heart, like instant fear. And I was like, oh boy, I've got some growing to do. I've got some changes to make. And I did. And fortunately, my wife at home was leading by a really wonderful example of how to practice that at home and how to behave at home and how to try to live a principled life. I mean, a shining example. And it took some time. And I'm happy to say, and she may tell you differently after, that I do what you see up here is what you'll get from me wherever I go, and that's because of good sponsorship. That's because of a solid home group that taught me. I've learned a lot by making mistakes. Like I've lied during the men's. I don't recommend doing that because I can come right back around and fix it, and it's not a good look. Lied on my sobriety date for 9 months. I think the honesty piece kind of came last for me. It was hard. It was hard for me to just be honest about where I was at in life, what my fears were, and ask for help for them. And once I did get honest, the freedom from that, I mean, there was nothing that stopped me. And so I continued taking those actions, and life started to just, I mean, it's hard to articulate in words how amazing the freedom is inside, the freedom from alcohol and the ability to be able to serve people today and to have a spiritual connection and to be able to serve others and clean up the past. I mean, I can tell you that I've almost paid for every single financial amends that I ever made. And I stole a lot of money from a lot of people. And if you have any questions about making a financial amends, I'd be happy to talk to you after. I've been to the state, to the IRS, to old employers, to my family, and there's so much freedom there. So much freedom in being able to be honest with these people about the harm that I've done. And what the important part for me of the amends process, it's wonderful to be able to sit there and say, hey, I was wrong. Here's all the areas I was wrong, and what can I do to make this right? And the important part is, how am I going to behave after that? Am I going to practice the spiritual principles that I've been taught here and show these people that I'm going to live an amended life? That I'm going to show up to these events and commitments on time? That I'm going to be honest with them? That I'm going to try to be helpful wherever I go? And my family wouldn't even trust me in their homes. Like, they would hide their purses and they would hide their wallets. This is shortly after I first got sober, and wouldn't leave me in certain rooms alone, and in just a couple of years of sobriety as a result of taking the steps and taking the action to try to be better, they started giving me house keys and keys to safety deposit boxes, and my mom made me her medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney. I mean, it was unbelievable, and that had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous and you guys teaching me how to be an adult, how to live, how to play nice with the other kids and behave better and to show up to work on time. And my heart and my life, it started to become so full then, and I've really enjoyed being able to help people. And that was not how life was when I was drinking. I couldn't think of anybody but myself. I couldn't think of anything but my own fears and when am I drinking next, and I could never show up to anything, and if I did, my friends and family knew what state I would be in, and I would cause a fight the moment that they would shine a light on that. The moment that someone would try to help me, I would cause a fight and walk away. And we were able to take my mom into our home, and she was having a hard time a few years ago, and she lived with us for a little while, and my brother's going through some stuff right now, and he's getting ready to move in with us, and my family didn't trust me with anything before this, and they call me for financial advice. They call me for relationship advice, and I get to talk about spiritual stuff with my family, and they see what Alcoholics Anonymous can do, and they are so proud to know that I'm here. And they've referred people to me, and that's beautiful. That's really amazing that your family has seen a transformation, and they trust you enough with their loved ones and their friends to try to help them. And I'm talking a lot about like the spiritual side of things and the peace that I have today, and how I don't think about drinking a lot. The other part, and the lesser important part, I think, is the material world. And it did come back, and I've got a pretty lengthy checkered past, and I didn't think that I would have a career that was meaningful or that I could provide for my family, and that is absolutely not the case. I worked for the same company for 7 years, and before that I learned through good sponsorship and a good home group the job before that, how to show up to work on time, because I called out, and they told me how to behave better, and they told me how to get to work early and what to do while I was there and to try to serve others. And it's been really effective and beneficial for me to try to do that. What I've learned here on how to try to practice traditions, how to treat people, I mean, it's helped me everywhere, absolutely everywhere, because I can be at my job, and I work with some folks that are trying to live a spiritual way of life too. And just the other day, this woman came up to me, and she was having a hard day, and she looked at me and she said, "Can we pray?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And we just held hands and prayed right there. And it's amazing. When I first got sober, it was so uncomfortable for me, because every time my sponsor would meet with me, she'd stick her hands out and she'd say a prayer with me, and it felt really awkward and uncomfortable. Or if we were meeting in public, because she used to come up to the treatment facility and meet with me, if we'd meet in public, I'd be like peeking my head up, looking around to see who was looking at me while we were praying. And I can tell you today that I could absolutely kneel anywhere. I could stand anywhere. I could pray with anyone, and I would be proud and happy to do it, because I know that the solution for me is absolutely everything that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me. And it's tapping into the power that's here, that's enabled me to be able to develop a relationship with a God of my understanding, and in turn recreate my entire life. I mean, the book talks about it. It talks about the freedom from alcohol, the freedom from care, boredom, and worry, and that's been the truth for me. And I remember being really scared and thinking that this isn't going to work for me. I'm just so much more broken than these people. There's no way that Alcoholics Anonymous is going to save me. There's no way that God is going to save me. And I'm living proof that that's not true. I mean, the most important parts of my day are removing me from it with God's help, so that I can better serve you guys, so that I can better serve my coworkers and my family, and just try to be a vessel and try to be a better person. And when I make mistakes today, it hits my spirit differently. It hits it very differently. I know instantaneously that I've made a mistake. And what's different today is I can own that immediately. And that's what the program has taught me. It's okay to make mistakes, and there's a certain few things that I have to do to try to correct them, and how I should behave after that. And I should be especially helpful to the people that I'm bothered by, and I should probably take a look inside if I am bothered. It's usually got nothing to do with you guys, and 100% of the time it has everything to do with me. I don't want to ramble too much, but I do want to tell you that early sobriety for me was very scared. I'm still new at this. I'm growing in this program, and it's been a really beautiful process, and it hasn't always been smooth. I haven't done this thing perfectly. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've stepped on a lot of toes. I can tell you though that people in this room and people in my home group and good sponsorship, you guys really held me, and you wrapped your arms around me, especially when I was sick, and just showed me the way. And my hope is that I could do the same for the people that did that for me, because it meant so much, and it was so important for me to get anchored into a strong home group and attend it when it met, and to try to be a part of that group and try to serve where I can. So I don't want to ramble. I do want to thank you guys so much for letting me be here and being with all of us tonight. Thank you, Paige.